Our next segment is Why Florida? And we're going a little bit out of order today because of some unexpected events that have come up. But first, I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is our first of many direct lending events that we're going to host. Also want to thank our sponsors of today's event. I want to thank Sheridan. I want to thank Reed Smith and the Young India Fund. I'd like to introduce you to a family friend of mine, a business partner. I should have asked you how we met, but I don't need to be reminded. Jeb Bush introduced us. Roberto Muñoz is right now working at Florida Community Bank. He's very involved in Florida on many levels. Beacon Council, Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and about 50 others that I'm not aware of, but he's very involved. He's been involved for many years. He knows more about Florida than anyone else that I know, which is hard to actually imagine. There's very few people that know as much about the local economy as he does. He is a banker, and from that perspective, he understands non-banks. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to get somebody here to speak on a great topic. And he came up here on his own dime. And I'm really grateful for having you here today. And he's somebody to speak to you about why Florida. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How are you? You know, I always say coming to New York City from Miami is like me coming from the sixth borough, because Miami is your sixth borough, believe it or not. The people in Miami are probably the most attuned group of individuals to a New Yorker as you'll have anywhere in the United States. And therefore, we consider us to be your sunny side, because, of course, our weather is fantastic most of the time. Of course, when there's a hurricane, I can tell you it's not. But other than that, we have great weather, and it's a great place to operate. When Mike had asked me to come and make a speech, make a presentation on behalf of his excellent organization, which you all are hopefully tagging and tweeting and letting them know the importance of this kind of a seminar related information gathering symposium, that Mike, when he asked me to come, I knew it was an important request. And for me, being a banker now for 40 years, I wanted to, and very well versed in Florida, especially the Miami, South Florida area, which I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, was very important. So I came, I left this morning, obviously, was up at 3. It took me about 6 hours. Not that bad, considering that a lot of the time I spent was in the traffic in New York City. It wasn't really that bad to get here. So I'm very happy to be here. I did mention to you that I'm a 40-year banker, so I have spent in my 40 years, as an example, 15 years with Fuji Bank, being a Japanese institution. I was in charge of their Florida as well as their Latin American operations for project finance, reverse investment, direct investment, government lending, and corporate sector finance. I was also the chief lending officer for 7 years for Israel Discount Bank for the state of Florida, running their corporate book of business. I was just the BBVA, Banco Bilbao Vizcaya, just their South Florida market president. I started that bank in South Florida out of the garage of my home, worked there for 7 years, and I retired very recently. I thought it was a retirement, but it was a sabbatical because I couldn't sit still for too long. I traveled, I fished, I golfed, and 6 months within that period, my wife said, it's time for you to get out and go back to work. I know what she was telling me. So I listened to her very carefully, and so I've come back out. Now, I've come back out to an institution that isn't a global bank, because I have also worked with Barclays Capital in running their Florida operations historically. So I've come out of 30, 40 years of banking with about 35 years international, very powerful organizations. For me to come back out when I had a phone call from the CEO of a $13 billion bank, very small bank, the reason I did it is because Florida Community Bank has an extremely compelling story. And it fits within the modem of our discussion today, and that is how to raise capital, how to grow from 0 to 13 billion in 10 years, how to get $400 million worth of initial seed capital, go back for another 300 million, and give a 50%, 40% return to your investors on average during those 10-year period, when in fact during that 10-year period we came out of this massive recession. I'll make a little disclosure to you, and that if bankers like myself will tell you that we are worried about 2019. We don't know what it looks like, but after a very long recovery, we don't know if 19 or maybe 20 is the tail end of what we think will be a beginnings of some sort of slowdown recession. And I couldn't tell you if it's just a U.S. or a global recession, but whenever America catches a cold, it seems like the world catches pneumonia. So let's see if this is a right statement, or are we talking about China with the potential tariffs and potential financial debt that they have on their books? Does it start somewhere else? As we all know, the tequila effect of 1991 did not start in the United States. It started in Russia as they had a financial meltdown, went around through Latin America, and then back up to America. So it depends on what this round of next, I'll just call it a mini implosion or just a market resegmentation. But please be on the aware that we as bankers are looking at that. And therefore you see banks pulling back, as some of you have mentioned, some of the panelists mentioned today. So with that said, I will also let you know that I am the treasurer of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. I am also an executive board member of the Beacon Council, which is the official economic 501c3 for Miami-Dade County. I am the incoming chair of the World Trade Center. New York has a New York World Trade Center. I'm the vice chair of the Miami World Trade Center. I'm the incoming chairman. I've also sit on the board of the Chapman Partnership for the Homeless. I also am the vice president of finance for the Boy Scouts of America, and also an advisor for the American Institute of Bankers for their organization, and many other activities that I guess I don't want to talk about right now because it's just too many. So that's just a briefness of economic activity that I do and the social giving back that I do for what I consider to be the great state of Florida and Miami-Dade County, where I come from. So why Florida? So I'll start off, and I actually have, believe it or not, in the world of technology, I have my computer in my lap, but couldn't hook into the Wi-Fi here for some reason. So I'm going to take thank God I had a paper copy. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So here's a clicker. So let's see if the clicker works. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to go through a discussion sheet because it's important that you understand some of the demographics of this. And if you want a copy of this, this is also available for you to take a copy for a small fee to the organization. Now, I'm just kidding. I'm sure Michael will be very pleased. First of all, Florida's GDP, I want you to know, Florida's GDP ranks as the 16th largest economy in the world. A lot of you wouldn't believe that Florida, if it was an economy on its own, would be the 16th largest economy in the world. We're also the third largest population in the U.S. with 20 million residents. So we beat New York last year or year before as the number 3 most populous state, with California, Texas, and Florida. New York's number 4. We have about 112 million visitors annually. Not all of it is Orlando and Universal. It is also down in the south, the beaches. We have Canadians. We have everybody coming in, enjoying our beaches all the way from what we call the redneck Riviera of the Panhandle, all the way down to South Florida, which is beautiful and sunny, all the way to the Keys. So the whole state, as you know, is like a giant beach. But it's also very much a business-oriented location. Florida exports nearly $52 billion in goods made in the state, and is the 7th highest among all states. That's quite a statement when you consider Florida is a relatively young state. We're the second largest foreign trade zone network in the nation, and 1 out of every 5 companies that exports is located, that's in the United States. 1 of every 5 companies that exports in the United States is located in Florida. That's a huge statement. I'd like you to know that it's a comparison statement because it's important to know what you compare to. What do you compare to so you can get an idea of what we are? I will tell you that Florida's GDP of 2018 of about $967 billion with 21 million population and a GDP of 48,000, almost 49,000, equates on the GDP side to Turkey. I mentioned to you the 17th largest economy. And what economy is that? That's Turkey. Except Turkey has 80 million people. And their per capita is only 10,500. So you can see that Florida is produces 4 times greater GDP than does what we compare to, and that's Turkey. Miami's MSA, which is a metropolitan statistical area of $340 billion, being generated by 6 million people, earning about $47,000 on average, equates to the 33rd largest economy in the world, that being Hong Kong. So South Florida is Hong Kong. We don't have to go to Hong Kong to find Hong Kong. You go to South Florida to find Hong Kong. It's all U.S. And I can tell you that we also earn just a little bit more than Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a relatively wealthy location in the world, like Singapore. These are trading cities. We call city-states. But South Florida could be considered a city-state because it's the way the geography of Florida looks. It's a peninsula. Miami-Dade County, which is the more specific county that we'll be talking about a little bit later, we produce about $150 billion worth of GDP with 3 million people. And that equates to the 56th largest economy in the world being hungry. Now, that's true. I can tell you, Miami-Dade County, we're hungry. We're hungry for business. We're hungry for growth. So to compare to hungry makes all the sense in the world for me. So we have Turkey on top. We have hunger on the bottom. Boy, we really are ready to rock and roll, I can tell you that. And I'm very proud of our statistics. Our business climate in Florida, there's no personal income tax. I'll give you an example. So if you made $1 million in New York City, oh, I'm not turning the pages, thank you. So if you made $1 million in New York City, by the way, you can always just point to me if I'm not clicking. If you made $1 million in New York City and you pay 10% income tax, it's $100,000 a year. And that money you really don't see the return on. Of course, you know there's a return somehow, and maybe your bumpy roads or maybe some decaying bridges. I know it's getting somewhere. But all of our infrastructure is new. And I can tell you that $100,000 that you wouldn't pay there, you put it towards a home. And that's a lot of home you can buy with $100,000 worth of, just as an offset of not paying that particular personal income tax, because the state of Florida doesn't have that within its structure. We're the 2 best state for business, and just a general statement of the best state for business, whether it's taxes or whether it's the next one is the expedited permitting and regulatory assistance. We have a very swift regulatory and permitting process. Since 2010, regulations have been cut 3,000 times. And since 2010, taxes have been cut nearly 40 times. Now, what that does is it makes us an efficient place to do business, and a place where your dollar goes to your pocket. Your dollar becomes part of your R&D. Your dollar becomes hiring more people to staff what you need, and that is the growth of your business. The growth of your business, my friends, is the only thing you need to worry about daily. Because if you're not growing, by its nature, you're shrinking. So we all know that we wake up in the morning wanting to grow. Our talented workforce in Florida includes 7 million civilian in our labor force. We are a leader in high-tech employment in the U.S. We have 9.7 million civilian labor force in a right-to-work state. So the 7 million labor force as per U.S. consensus and our 9.7 civilian labor force in a right-to-work state go hand in hand because of the way we count, the way the U.S. Census counts us. So we're going to use the 9.7 million availability. In that, we have 5 million foreign language speakers, and that is also very creative towards global business. The majority being Spanish, Portuguese, and then the rest of the languages that are out there, but very heavy on the Spanish. Miami-Dade County has a very diversified. I mentioned to you that MSA segmentation. Miami-Dade County has a diverse economy, and you would think it would be all tourism because of the weather, but it's not. 25% of it is trade and transportation. 15% is education and health services. 14% is professional and business services. And then 13% is government. And guess what? 12% of that slice is the leisure and hospitality. The rest are other areas, including financial activity, which is 7%. So 7% is an area that I specialize in because I'm a banker, and it's a 7% that you would consider in moving your headquarters, your locations, opening an office, growing your business. That would be where you would fall into that area, and it's growing. On our targeted industries forecast for Miami-Dade County, aviation, as an example, is one of the areas that we concentrate on. So this is where the economy is broken down. Aviation, banking and finance, creative design, which is fashion, hospitality, tourism, life science and health service, technology, trade and logistics. The highest paid category in this quote-unquote area of business is banking and finance at about $129,000 per person per year, approximately. You might think that's a lot, but really, in the scope of an average price for a professional, it fits well within the dynamic of a price point, especially when compared to New York for the same comparable person. In summary, for finance and insurance in Miami-Dade County, the summary of this is we are 4% above the national average in job growth. This compares very favorably with about 118,000 of average earnings per job on average. Compares well with the United States of about 118. So you don't see an inflation there of additional cost related to opening an office or business in South Florida or in Dade County. It makes it for a very reasonable place to do business. Our regional trends are our job growth is strong with about 7% in Miami-Dade, 2% or 3% within the Fort Lauderdale, Miami Beach area. And this compares to about a 7% change in America. So it would really be slightly lower as a change in a comparison basis. But the reality statement is we are very on par with earnings per person, which is key. Our job summary, basically for our industry summary and portfolio management in Miami-Dade, our jobs were about 1,174 for 2017 in the portfolio management area. It's a 21% change. The average per job is about $232,000 for portfolio management business activity. Computer engineering, science occupations. As you can see, the growth there has been quite strong over 2013, 14, 15, and 16. And so the statement is we have a lot of computing capability in our region that can assist in the growth of your businesses when you consider moving to Miami or South Florida as a whole, and of course Miami-Dade County. Our population growth in South Florida of Miami-Dade County, as I mentioned, is about 3 million, which it is. Our population growth, it's about 2.7 to be specific. Our growth to 2022 is another 100 and something, 150,000. Broward County, which is the next county up, a small growth, not that much, but we are about 1.9, almost 2 million people. Palm Beach County going from 1.4 to 1.5. Overall, South Florida is increasing about 500,000, 400,000 in population to the year 2022. So you can see it's quite condensed. It's a very nice market area to be in. It's not overpopulated in the sense of being overpopulated, and you have a good workforce to work with. Florida as a whole, right now we're number 20, and we'll be growing to from 21 million to about 22, 23 million by the year 2022. Diversity in Miami as an example for business and business activity is you can see that half of the county's 2.7 residents are foreign born, and about 2/3 speak a second language in addition to English. The majority of that population growth is out of the Caribbean, then comes South America, followed by Central America, and the rest come from other areas. Our big influx was from Cuba. For those that know South Florida, Miami in particular, during the many years Cubans have populated to Miami, they've been a tremendous backbone of growth and activity, especially since the professionals of that island were the ones that came over to provide the foundation of our growth and activity. Why Miami? Specifically, why? Miami is a place to work, live, and play. We are #1 city for business in Latin America, according to America's Economía. #1 business for business. #1 business. So if you were in Caracas or you were in Bogota, you would rank Miami as your #1 business city. So the influence of Latin America from Miami is great through Latin America. Hence, if you were doing business in Miami and wanted to reach Latin America, that reach is fantastic. It is our strongest reach point, which we'll see a little more in a minute. But we are growing our bases to include all of Europe, whereby Spain is our #1 investor. By far, Spain is our #1 investor. And then followed by Asia, where we are looking now for direct flights that will allow us to penetrate that market and allow for direct foreign investment to occur in our region from the Asian markets on a direct basis. But you will see that China is our second largest trading partner. We are the happiest place to work. You can tell how happy I am. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning. I've been traveling actually 3 o'clock, traveling all day. I'm happy. I'm happy to be here. I can tell you that happiness is really part of our lifestyle, and it creates a good work environment. We are also #1 most active startup in the United States, according to the Kauffman Foundation Index. We're #2 in the nation for tech job creation. This is Miami, according to the some statistical entities. We are #1 U.S. public school district to provide wireless connectivity to all schools. #1 top transit accessibility U.S. airport. I just came out of LaGuardia. #2 in the nation. I won't talk bad about LaGuardia because I'm a guest of New York and I want to be safe when I go back today. But the reality statement is we are #1 most accessible airport. #2 in the nation for international passenger activity. #1 in the county for healthy choices. For me, healthy choices means we have a lot of very good restaurants, so you can tell that I'm a great visitor of them at any given day. We're top most influential, most interconnected city in the world. We have 1,000 multinational corporations in South Florida, specifically in Miami, headquartered specifically in Coral Gables, accessing mostly Latin America, but the world as a whole. We have 2.7 million residents, as I've mentioned before. 50% are foreign born, and we have 106 languages in our schools. Miami is a global city. No doubt about that. We are a global city. And the people of Miami are global thinkers. We're globally trained, and I can tell you that when you go to Miami, you'll see many like me, highly energetic, highly trained, able to do business very quickly. Transit, the Miami Transit is one of the most well-connected regions in the country, and we're investing in award-winning new strategies for connecting our growing region with new technology. Now, what makes us interesting is that we are a peninsula. So whether we're bringing in electric wires or we're bringing in transit, it's going in a peninsula structure. It's not easy to build through peninsula activity because it's north-south or south-north. You can't go east-west easily because there's nowhere to go but the ocean. So we've been very adept and apt at building our networks in a north-south environment, whether it's electricity, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation. Our talent in Miami has more than 1.3 million people. As I mentioned, about 2 million, about 3 million. Our diverse economy in a range of industries means companies will be able to attract talent from existing markets at every skill level. Let me explain the reality of that statement. Most of our people come from somewhere else. So if you were coming in to Miami and you were bringing in your team of quants or your team of tech or your team of individuals, they'd be very well suited in Miami because we accept everybody that wants to come down there. Of course, our talent pool is strong, and therefore you'd be hiring very strong local talent, and that's really important for us. Talent and keeping talent in our marketplace is one of our key goals, and I think we've been very successful out of our schools. Our burgeoning arts and culture, we have a very strong cultural and art environment, including one of only a few places in the world that host the Art Basel. Many of you know that. There's only 3 or 4 places in the world that host the Art Basel. And we also have very strong galleries, reach of gallery and painters from Latin America and around the world. We also have very strong performing arts and other events. Now, we're not, as I would say, as developed as New York in that one area as a comparable, but we have a huge growth occurring in the arts and culture of Miami, and a lot of money's been put in. We just opened a science and planetarium that's state of the art. Miami-Dade has infrastructure, and we really, one of our key infrastructure locations are Port of Miami, Miami International Airport, and the universities. What can I say about them? We have 36 shipping lines to 100 companies, to 250 ports around the world. We are Panamex ready. Now, Panamex ready means a cruise, a container ship, which the Panama Canal has been enhanced to be able to take on average, historically, a container ship could carry about 12,000 containers. Today, they carry about 20,000 containers. To be able to have the Panama Canal take on a 20,000 container ship really means that they were able to increase their capacity drastically. And Miami's the first port or the second port on the East Coast to be able to handle those ships. We're also the cruise ship capital of the world. As of most recent numbers, we're about 5.1 million people, whether it's Carnival Cruise, whether it's Royal Caribbean, whether it's Norwegian Cruise Lines, or the other 4 or 5 lines that handle cruising and cruising capabilities. We are #1 in the world. Our airline, Miami International Airport, has 109 airlines running through it. About 44 million passengers pass through International Airport every year. 153 weekly flights to Europe and 1,100 weekly flights nonstop to all Latin American cities. We have that reach very carefully. We have 6 major universities. Many of you are familiar with Florida International University, University of Miami. We have 6 in total, including Miami-Dade Community College, which is the largest Hispanic university in the United States, with about 150,000 students. It's huge. And if we were just a college city, Miami, we would rank as the 4th largest college city in America. So just consider if we didn't have any other infrastructure, it was just there to have college and activity, we'd rank #4 in the United States. What's interesting is our access points. So you can see Miami being the center of our access. In a 2-hour trip, we can pretty much cover a lot of the region around Miami. But really, it's not the 2-hour trip that counts, but between 2 to 6 hours, we cover all through Latin America and most of the United States, especially in that 6-hour horizon. On the 9-hour horizon, we go all the way to Buenos Aires. Please know, these are huge geographies. going all the way to Buenos Aires from Miami or New York, that's a huge geography. That's a long trip, no matter how you take it. And within 11 hours, we cover all the way to Moscow and beyond. I was just recently in China. I was recently in Hong Kong. By the way, I grew up in Hong Kong from 9 to 15. My dad worked for Pan American Airways, so I know airline business extremely well. I left when I was 9 years old, came back when I was 16. I know Asia extremely well. Not only that, spending 6 years of my life with the Chinese, specifically, at a young age. I spent 15 years with the Japanese. So about 20 odd years of my life are Asian. And I know that culture extremely well. We are very welcoming in Miami for that culture to come because we know that they can provide more diversity and business activity to our region. As a just discussion on average weekly schedules, I had mentioned to you our total flights in a week, 3,000 flights a week, 3,130 flights a week, all the way from the United States, all parts of America, to South America. So even from New York, your stretch to Miami is not that far when you consider what it would take to get to Miami. But from Miami, we have the access points and the contacts to have a very smooth business for you to operate from Miami into Latin America, the #1 city in the world for that kind of business. Our customs district, as an example, I had mentioned Brazil is our #1 partner. They are. Brazil is our #1 partner. No, Brazil is a huge economy. Know that Brazil is a brick. Know that when you say Brazil in a brick, you are mentioning Brazil, you're mentioning India, China, and Russia all at the same time. They are a brick country. It is an emerging market, very powerful. Boeing just bought 80% of their local manufacturer, airplane manufacturer, Embraer. They're a high-tech, great market area, and Miami has very strong access points to that region. China, in this particular custom data, is #2, and then Colombia, #3, and then Dominican Republic, which is in the Caribbean, 4, and the rest of them, as you can see. But these are our top trading market areas for trade. Cost of living comparison, I mentioned before, New York's expensive. Now, for our point of view, it is expensive. For your point of view, it's expensive. Miami is about, on average, about 14% above the average. That's the whole average of America. You are 238% San Francisco. Who's here from San Francisco? There is somebody from San Francisco. You're #2 at 192%. It's expensive out there, too. We know that because of Silicon Valley, and then I guess it reaches out from there to some of the other high-tech areas that make it very, very expensive. But Miami-Dade County, on average, is not really a crazy expensive area to live, and we have a very high value of life, a very high value of living in Miami. Our public schools, as I mentioned before, specifically our public schools, not our universities. I said that if our universities would be all added together, we'd be the 4th largest university city in America. In fact, we are also the 4th largest school district in America with about 345,000 students. So you can imagine if you had a hedge fund that catered to that ecosystem, that's a huge ecosystem of creativity. Not only the students of 345,000, but their parents. Multiply that by 2. If they're divorced, you still multiply it by 2, or you might add 2 more, depending on how that looks. So if you have products and activities related to students, that's a huge market area for business and business activity. More than 50 languages are spoken from 100 companies that are represented. The Miami-Dade Public School also is a leader of choice programs in financial technologies. We have 17 magnet schools in finance, international business and finance, and financial services. We also have academies of finance. There's 14, but they increased it by 2, 4 or 3, that prepare students for post-secondary education for universities, etc. So it is an area that we understand finance to be a great area for our future and our business activities. We have over 300 private schools on top of that, another 100,000 students, 120,000 on top of that. 500,000 students in total compose that 2.73 million population base, which means that it's a young population base on average. A lot of talent. Our talent pipeline in general for the universities in Miami-Dade County, we have 210 associates, 1,644 bachelor programs. These are individuals graduating this year. Master's 713, PhDs 1. I think that's a wrong number. I don't think that's true for PhDs graduating this year. It's much more. But in general, 2,500 this year are graduating from above or higher education in our area. Our quality of life, we all know we have all the names for the sports. We have the Miami Marlins, Miami Heat, the Miami Panthers, which is hockey, the Miami Dolphins. Of course, we know the Miami Hurricanes. And now we're building a world-class soccer franchise with David Beckham handling that franchise. We're world-class healthcare with 42,000 practitioners in all medical fields, very big in healthcare. We're the third largest county in the world with park systems, consisting of 270 parks, friendly, walkable neighborhoods, a wide range of exciting activities all year long, sophisticated dining as an area of very nice restaurants in Miami, South Florida, South Beach areas. And we have 2,000 plus city bikes at 275 locations. The last thing I'll say is the Beacon Council is an organization that is charged with making sure that businesses are well taken care of. I can tell you that there are many hedge funds in Miami and PE firms. We expect in the next 10 years we will beat probably New York City with the number of hedge funds working or operating out of Miami, South Florida. We do think 10, maybe 12 years from now, a lot of you will be there or before. It's a great place to work, live, and play, as I mentioned. The Beacon Council is the primary organization that helps companies relocate from where they are. We will take on your projects. We will help you with your information flow. We will help you with your permitting. We will assist you in any way we can. There is no cost to you as an organization to meet and work with the Beacon Council to allow Beacon Council to be the organization that helps you make that decision to move to our area. With that, I want to thank you, and I will take any questions that you have. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah. Could you comment? I want to address your economic point of view in terms of the economy. Can you address what you see in 2019 or coming down the pike as a economic negative that could cause a recession, et cetera? Because I could tell you the following. If you take a look at the participation rate in this country, it's still fairly low relative to where it was. 2, 70% of GDP is consumer spending. The consumer is nowhere near flush with cash yet. Even though we have 2% inflation, we've reached the Fed target. I don't see inflation becoming a major problem. What characteristics do you see that would cause you concern in this economy? And take U3 versus U6 unemployment. Unemployment right now is about 4% on the U3 level. On the U6 level, it's like 10%. So there's plenty of potential population out there for employment. So I'm just curious to see what your view is on the economy going forward.
Those economic discussions are driven by a few things. Number one, we are already at the long end of a recovery at 8 years. So 2019 will take us to almost 8 years, 9 years of a recovery cycle, which is way long in this cycle, number one. Number two, we do have now, again, rising petroleum costs. That does bite into consumer disposable income. We have rising interest rates as well after having a very low interest rate environment. There's no way that we are not going to not ratchet up a little bit more, probably, by the Fed standards, and therefore customers and consumers are impacted by at least those two factors. If there is a tariff on steel and other imports that come in, cars are expected to increase by $5,000 or $6,000 or more per unit, which can cause tremendous amount of headache. There is probably at this stage right now of our cycle right today, based on what's going on, there's a complete upheaval really in the supply chain structure. People right now are looking for new sources of opportunity because the static China-U.S. relation, if there is tariffs involved and it is expensive, people will find other alternative ways to lower that cost if possible, whether it's steel or other from more friendly locations that are, or domestic. In my view, investing in America with a strong dollar is more expensive than it was. A lot of our economy is driven still by direct foreign investment. If a dollar is really strong, you have less direct foreign investment going on, and therefore that impacts the purchase of real estate and other things. As you know, New York City is a huge consumer of sales of real estate to foreign entities or individuals. And if that currency is weaker, that sale stops. If construction slows down, that tails the economy. America is a real estate-driven animal, whether it's construction, real estate, brokering, plumbing. That whole supply chain and just real estate is a massive machine of growth. And if that slows down a little, that also impacts us too. So these are the things that I see in the horizon. These are written structures. I think everybody's taking an abundance of caution that, look, cycles don't go on forever. I can tell you frankly, and I'm a banker for a very long time, in 2007, when I was doing a $250 million school deal, it was 2008. It was priced in July 2008, priced. When I went to market in July 2008 at LIBOR plus 250 on that deal, which is slightly high to the market, I found that by August, as I was syndicating, I couldn't sell it at 250. The banks wanted 275. I went back to the borrower. I said, look, the new number is 275. As I went back to the market said, we can't take it at 275. We need 300. It ended up pricing at 400 over LIBOR to get that deal over the hump in August. By September, by October, Lehman Brothers was already in trouble. I can tell you that despite seeing that, I did not know there was a recession even near me. I had a nasty 5-ton elephant in the room sitting next to me, and I couldn't smell it. We went through the deepest recession ever, other than the Great Depression. The Great Recession occurred at that moment, and we couldn't even smell it. And what's interesting is all of these quote-unquote securitizations that were AAA rated, were non-rated by the next couple of years after those papers were readdressed and reassessed. Mortgage securitizations, other prime-based car loan securitizations, we just didn't know what it was. What I'm saying to you is that for us not to be able to look into the eyes of that animal and say, can that animal still, is the animal in the room? Again, I can't smell it either. Should I deny the history? Should I just sit here and say that it would never happen? The answer is no. We just have to be more cautious, and I think we have to really understand what our risk parameters are and build against that in this new potential 2019 situation. And we heard some of our panelists talk about risk mitigation techniques, including credit insurance and other things, et cetera. And by the way, AIG, if the government didn't do what it did, it would have been a disaster in bailing out a lot of these entities that if they weren't bailed out with excess liquidity, we would still be in some kind of disastrous environment today. So anyway, those are my views on that. And these are private views as opposed to specific views, because we just don't know when it will happen. I'm using empirical statements on when a cycle should have some issues. We're in 8 years in a cycle. Well, with that, I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the moment. And I look forward to seeing you in Miami. Michael, thank you for inviting me today. And if it's okay, thank you.